Good evening, and I will call the regular meeting of the Oak Ridge City Council for June to order. Our invocation this evening will be led by Reverend Joseph Westfall, Associate Pastor at Oak Valley Baptist Church. We're glad to have him here. And then Amelia Hetrick, who will look familiar to some people in this room, who is a sixth grade student at Robertsville Middle School, will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend Westfall, if you will, in your invocation, just reference our thanks and love for Shigeko Upaluri, who passed away last week. In my opinion, one of the most beloved citizens in the history of this city, with many beloved citizens. But I'd like for us to remember Ram, her son, and the blessing she was for all of us. So if everyone would please stand.
Honorable Mayor and council members, staff, and guests, may we bow our heads. Gracious and almighty God, once again we come before your throne. We have the earthly matters before us. We acknowledge the limits of our wisdom. We acknowledge our desire to serve the people of Oak Ridge. And we also acknowledge that some of our problems are the results of our own choices and desires. Allow us all to join in open and honest discussion. Help us to appreciate each point of view, each desire to be heard, and the reality that only your way is the perfect path. We pray for tolerance. We pray for creative solutions. We pray that we do not run away from difficult decisions, but face the needs of everyone concerned. Our government and leaders are always in your hands. Your influence will establish the outcome. May we seek to do your will in all circumstances. O Holy One who sits upon the throne of the universe, we ask of you, forgive us in our selfishness, guide us in our discussions, open our eyes to the possibilities that only you can see from your perspective. Establish those things this day that will make for the greatest good. Hear also our compassion over loss of those who have served and left their legacy, both within this town and its reaches beyond. These are our prayers, our Father. We offer this night in the name of your Son, the Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amelia?
Young lady.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem Dotson.
Here.
Councilmember Gleason. Here. Mayor Gooch.
Here.
Councilmember Hammond.
Here.
Councilmember Hensley.
Here.
Councilmember Hope. Here. Councilmember Smith.
Here. And our next item of business is a special public recognition. And I'm going to call on Maria Catron, the Executive Director of the Oak Ridge Housing Authority, to make this presentation. Ms. Catron.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It is my honor and privilege to share with you a special recognition. Nationally, the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Authorities annually look for commissioners throughout the country that embody excellence in advocating for housing and community involvement. Each state looks for commissioners that fill that role, and I'm proud to present and share with you all today that our very own Thomas L. Beehan was recognized at the Tennessee Association of Housing and Redevelopment Authorities as Commissioner of the Year for the state of Tennessee.
Mayor Beehan, absolutely.
This won't be very long, but it's not one person that makes these issues, makes the housing issues work. First of all, our board is pretty tremendous, and if you've been to the meeting, Ellen, you have, and I think you have too. The board makes the difference. But the best thing we ever did was to hire a director who knew what she was doing, and she coached us through a lot of things. So I'm very happy to have this honor, but also realize that there's a board and a large group of people who participate in this, and especially Maria and her staff. And if you ever have a chance, we invite you to our board meetings or to take a tour. So thank you again for allowing her to do this for me and for the Housing Authority itself.
Well said, and thank you for your continuing service to our city.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Madam Clerk, next item.
The consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? There are none, which means all the consent items have been approved. All right, Madam Clerk, next item.
Okay, under public hearings and first reading of ordinances, you have an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances, City of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, by creating a new Title 23 titled Food Trucks for the purpose of regulating mobile food vending within the city boundaries of the City of Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
So move.
It's moved and seconded, and it's my understanding that this ordinance has been approved unanimously or recommended unanimously by the Planning Commission. Mr. Hensley, Mr. Dotson, is that correct?
That's correct. That is correct.
All right. Mr. Suggs?
Ms. Racker, the city attorney, was instrumental in preparing this item, and I think at this point I'll let her explain it.
All right, Ms. Racker.
All right, so for first reading tonight, you have the companion ordinance to the one that Planning Commission looked at. So this is the food truck permitting process that we're going to place into the city code. So it is modeled off of some area cities, so we're doing something very similar to what other cities do, so it's not anything that would be unusual to the food truck vendors to come through and do this process. It also codifies the process that we're doing right now of doing the fire department inspections to ensure safety. It's a $50 permit fee, annual, it can be renewable. And then we also added in some language regarding the food truck provisions that we talked about last time and placed those in the city code as well. So if you have any specific questions, be happy to answer them for you.
Questions for Ms. Racker? Mr. Hensley?
I assume is that $50 per vendor or $50 per event?
It's per your food truck.
Okay.
So it would cover you for the whole year, no matter how many events you went to.
Ms. Smith?
Yeah.
I just thought of one thing that I should probably point out. So there is the legislation that went through with the state statute provision does have a provision now that takes effect that if someone gets a permit through the state fire prevention office, then that person is not required to have a local permit. But the state law does not require food truck vendors to obtain that state permit, so it would be an either or option for them. So that's built into our provisions as well.
Yeah, Ms. Smith.
Yeah, question about the state permits. What do they require? Is it different from what we require in this ordinance, or would it be highly similar to what we've got here?
I do not know yet. The state fire marshals or fire prevention office was required in that legislation to develop a process, so I'm not sure what their process is going to be. But when we do find out what that is, we'd be happy to compare it, and if there's some modifications that might be beneficial for us to make, we can come back with those.
Well, I remember there was an issue of some jurisdictions following an older fire code than we had in Oak Ridge, and I'm concerned about whether that's going to be part of the state permit or whether we can enforce the 2018 International Fire Code here.
If I'm remembering correctly, and I will bring it for second reading, I'll bring the language of the public chapter with me and put it in I'll send it to you in an email tomorrow. But I believe it does reference specific provisions regarding safety of propane and those type of things. So I think it is going to be maybe comparable to the 2018.
Okay.
But yeah, the state is still behind the city of Oak Ridge as far as the fire code edition that they've adopted.
And another question, there's something in this ordinance that indicates that food trucks should not be using amplified sound, which is interesting given that some food trucks want to call out that somebody's order is ready when there are a lot of customers, and I'm wondering whether this is going to be communicated, that they need to find a way to communicate with their customers so that they don't have to hang around right by the window of the truck, so that they can find out that their order's up. It seems like something, it must be done in other jurisdictions, and I'm curious to know how they do it.
That was something I found in a lot of the other jurisdictions to indicate that you weren't to do amplified sound.
Yeah.
I made the assumption that that was more for don't do loud music, don't be yelling at people as they walk by. I really didn't think about it from the standpoint of your order's ready, but I'll look into that for second reading.
Okay, appreciate that.
Any other questions?
I got a quick
Mr.
question.
Hammond.
It's just a quick implementation question for folks who may ask. If we think in terms of implementation timeline of this a particular ordinance, we've got the first reading tonight in June, second reading in July. So let's just assume, will people begin to apply? If I've got a food truck and I'm sitting at the house and I'm seeing this come through, what's the implementation? Will people be able to just start this in July as soon as we approve it, or is there some implementation delay? Will that be communicated? How are we handling that end of the process?
We will communicate the provisions of the ordinance to let people know, and there's quite a few food truck vendors that we're already aware of, so we can make direct contact with them. I would ask that Lauren, when we get it all ready, that she work with me on that communication to make sure that we get that out to everyone. And while everyone right now already has to go through the process of the fire department inspection for safety, for the permit process, I would say we'd probably do like a 30-day delay like we have on some of our other provisions for enforcement, so that we give them a time period to come in and get that permit.
Gotcha. So a communication may be like effective this date per se, is what we're thinking?
Yeah. And if you want, we can amend the ordinance and give it a delayed effective date. If you want to, we can add a section that says that we won't enforce the provisions until 30 days after adoption or something along that line.
And I'm okay with it. I myself, I'm okay with it as is. I'm just
Okay.
trying to think through our communications of what we're doing here to the public and to people with food trucks or people who may want to be buying from food trucks, how soon they might see them. Just the implementation side of it. But I'm good.
Okay, because we'll have those 10 days for sure between after when City Council adopts it before it becomes effective, and we'll do some widespread communication to the vendors, but we're certainly not going to ask people on day one to have their permit in place. We will still ask that they have their fire department inspection because they need to have that process done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dodson.
This may be a little before the next one, but I know that at Planning Commission, we were talking about what has driven some of the food truck parks, and I think it was mentioned that we have a certain organization that would like to establish a food truck park, and that's one of the things I wanted to follow up on Mr. Hammond's remarks with regards to the timeline. We are looking at something like this. So do we have somebody who is looking at establishing a food truck park in the city of Oak Ridge?
Yes, we had a lady come into the office. She spoke with myself, Jennifer Williams, and Wayne Blasius about a food truck park that she was interested in developing across from her existing business. She was under, I believe, a contract to purchase the property, but she had some time period to decide whether she's going to move forward or not. So that's why we moved forward with the zoning aspect first, because we told her we would do it as soon as we possibly could. But I wouldn't think that her food truck park in and of itself, it's not going to be ready to go like within 2 weeks or something
I wanted
from now.
to see how quickly she needed that. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Motion's been made and seconded to approve, and we're on the board. This is on first reading. I-7, no nays, and it is approved on first reading. Next item, Madam Clerk.
So under final adoption of ordinances, you have an ordinance to amend ordinance number 2 titled the zoning ordinance of the City of Oak Ridge, Tennessee by amending Article 2 titled Definitions to add definitions for food truck and food truck park, by creating a new section 3.38 titled Food Truck Parks, to establish regulations for permanent food truck parks, by amending Section 7.03 titled B2 General Business Districts, Section 7.04 titled UB2 Unified General Business Districts, and Section B3 titled Roadside Business Districts, to add food truck parks as an allowed principal use, and by amending Section 7.02 titled B1 Neighborhood Business Districts, and Section 8.01 titled IND1 Industrial Districts, to add food truck parks as an allowed use with special exception granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the public hearing is required tonight.
Move to accept.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council during the public hearing on this item? Looking to my left, looking to my right. Don't see any. I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Public hearing is closed. We're back on the motion to approve. Mr. Blasius.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As noted, this is the second reading of an amendment to the Oak Ridge zoning ordinance. It differentiates from the item you just passed from the legal department in that this is about permanent businesses, a land use question, not a truck question. In this case, what's on the property is the trucks you've just been discussing permitting for, but rather this is the creation of a permanent business that would have food trucks as its product or content, if you will. Happy to answer questions as well. I have Jennifer Williams, senior planner on our staff, who actually wrote this ordinance and took it to Planning Commission, and as the mayor indicated, it was passed unanimously by Planning Commission.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Hensley?
Yeah, I'd like to point out one thing that I did before, and that is that there may be existing businesses that could also apply and be a food truck park. For instance, Weigel's, they have the facilities to do that, so they could be also a food truck park.
All right, any other comments or questions for staff? If not, the motion is to approve. This is on the second and final reading. We're on the board. Ayes 7, no nays, and the ordinance is approved on second reading. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
An ordinance to amend ordinance number 10-2022, which ordinance provides for a budget and appropriations for municipal purposes for the fiscal year which began on July 1st, 2022, by adopting a budget and adopting appropriations by amending said appropriations, and the public hearing was held on first reading for this one.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? Seeing none, we're on the board. Motion is to approve. This is the fiscal year 2023 budget appropriation amendment. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now it's 7 ayes and no nays, and it is approved. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
An ordinance to amend ordinance number 19-82 as amended by deleting the provision of section 2 pertaining to the schedule of water rates for commodity charges and minimum monthly billing in its entirety, and substituting therefore a new schedule of water rates, and no public hearing is required.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Suggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This ordinance is the second reading needed to implement the rate adjustments that we discussed last meeting. The rate adjustments will be spread across 2 years. They're required by the state of Tennessee State Revolving Fund to help finance our water plant.
Are there any additional questions for Mr. Suggs? Mr. Hensley?
Mr. Suggs, what's DOE's position on the water rates?
DOE's water rates remain fixed to the cost of operating the existing plant. When this new plant comes into operation, we're going to have to enter negotiations with them. And at this point, I would be really not be wanting to speculate on what their position will be.
Okay, any other question for Mr. Suggs or staff? Seeing none, the motion is to approve, and we're on the board. Got it. I-7, no nays, and it is approved on second and final reading. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
An ordinance to provide revenue for municipal purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023, by imposing a tax on all property within the city, fixing the rate of the tax, adopting a budget, and adopting appropriations, and a public hearing is required tonight.
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. I need a motion to open the public hearing. So moved. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on the 2024 fiscal year budget? This time I'll start on my right, then to my left. I see no one indicating wishing to address council, so I need a motion to close the public hearing. So moved. Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All right, so we are back, and the motion is to approve the fiscal 24 budget. I-7, no nays, and the budget is approved. And once again, I want to thank everyone, staff, for their hard work on putting the budget together and the hard work of the Budget and Finance Committee. And I'll have more to say later about the Compensation Committee. But thank you all, everyone, for your hard work. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
We have resolutions, and under resolutions, staff has requested that item A be removed from the agenda.
All right,
Postponed.
so we're going to item B.
Yes. Hold on one second. Sure. A resolution delegating to the Industrial Development Board of the City of Oak Ridge the authority to negotiate and accept payments in lieu of ad valorem tax with respect to a certain project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and finding that such payments are deemed to be in furtherance of the public purposes of the board as defined in Tennessee Code Annotated Section 7-53-305.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Suggs, or who's got this one?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Mayor. The city of Oak Ridge was approached by a company wishing to develop the land behind, best described to me as behind Books A Million and Gold's Gym. We were asked to consider a pilot for that under our existing policy. We used the existing policy in the commercial description to calculate what the pilot should be. And given that we believe that the approach was for a long-term hotel, and being that we looked at the DOE contractor pool and the future construction projects, we thought that was a good thing for Oak Ridge. And further, the lot itself is very constrained. It's got several utility easements on it in a floodplain. So we put that into the evaluation for a commercial establishment, and then we turned up with a 33% tax abatement for 10 years was going to be the recommendation. We thought that was reasonable. When we took that forward to discuss with the IDB, we learned that state law requires us not to consider hotels under the commercial. They have to be considered individually as hotels, and that's something we didn't know about when we originally started. To fix the problem, there were three possible solutions. Number one, don't offer the pilot. Staff recommends, I recommend that we go ahead and do offer the pilot because of the reasons I described. The second was to change our pilot policy to add a section for hotels. But changing the pilot process, last time we did it, took about 6 months because the city has to do it, the IDB has to adopt it, we adopt it, we go to Roane County, and it takes about 6 months to change that. The third option was to bring this item before you, which asks you to delegate that authority in the case of a hotel to the IDB so that the IDB can move forward with the decision if recommended in other parts of the policy.
Mr. Hope?
Mr. Suggs, is it just for this particular project that we'd be delegating that authority, or would it be for any future project in the future?
It's just for this particular one as described
Thank
in
you.
the memo.
And did the Budget Committee have a chance to review? Okay. Okay, so you have any questions or any concerns about it?
Yeah, I do have some questions. I think first I asked the city manager this question earlier today about what other hotels have received any kind of tax abatement, either a TIF or a pilot in the past.
And the information I'm looking for, it's been a long time, about, I sent that to you, but it's been one hotel that was done and one that was approved, but the Holiday Inn Express was approved, but they never submitted. And I'm looking for that, the date. It's right here somewhere.
I think you indicated that the Staybridge had received
Yes, that's correct. It was the Staybridge, and it was in 2007, so it's been a long time since we looked at a hotel.
Okay. But we have had other hotels built since then, at least one. We had the Marriott built.
And to my knowledge, they have not approached the city or the IDB and asked for a pilot.
Well, then I wanted to know what's different for this hotel versus other hotels that have built here and apparently been successful in the market without requiring a tax abatement.
Ms. Smith, first of all, the simple thing, we have when they approached the city, they asked specifically if we would consider a pilot for them. And when they did, I perhaps mistakenly, I went to the commercial approved matrix and looked at it to calculate what they would get. So I felt like a pilot was appropriate given the amount of the investment and, more importantly, the challenging location. It looked to me like trying to incentivize development of that lot, given the floodplains and the utility complications, was something that might make the project viable when it otherwise might not be. But certainly, I have to say, had another hotel come forward, the Holiday Inn did come forward, was approved, but did not follow through with the application process. Had another hotel come forward and made the request, we would have evaluated it given the facts that they presented.
And one of the issues on this property is the floodplain, and this is right adjacent to East Fork Poplar Creek, and it looks like in that section there's been fill placed on both sides of the creek, so that there's not really much of a floodplain there anymore already, and we've probably got constrained flow in that section of the channel. So if more fill were placed to make this project successful, we'd be probably further reducing the ability of that stream to carry water through that area. Has this been evaluated from the floodplain perspective?
When we look at this pilot project, we're not looking at engineering issues like that. It's simply an investment and return decision the city has to make. That said, I will tell you that I have seen conceptual drawings, and the conceptual drawings show this hotel pulled as far as you can away from that floodplain. The parking lot's also not in the floodplain, so they've done a conceptual drawing that shows a very good accommodation of the area. But again, to be clear, I haven't done an engineering review, nor have we submitted it for one.
Yeah, well, it isn't a very large tract, so it's hard to see how they can manage to get a hotel and parking on there without having floodplain involvement, and it's hard, and I don't know what the dimensions of the floodplain are there. but it seems like it seems like there's an issue there, and I'm concerned about incentivizing a project in order to use a floodplain, which is something we really shouldn't be doing.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gleason.
Thanks, sir. Jack, have they submitted any information around job creation, salaries, any of that sort of normal IDB request forms yet?
Yes, they have submitted information about job creation and numbers and salaries. As you may recall, the IDB job credits that are allowed are only allowed for jobs that exceed the Anderson County average wage. And many of these jobs are housekeeping jobs and things that are below that. So they received no credit for the job creation when they were put into the formula because of the wages.
Thank you.
Mr. Dodson.
Looking at the back end of this, if this was approved, the taxes normally would go to the city. Those tax dollars, hotel motel taxes, trickle down into the Convention and Visitors Bureau or Explore Oak Ridge. Could this adversely affect the amount of money that would go into their pot for what they do?
So a couple thoughts on that, if you'll forgive my rambling for a second. The building the hotel will add capacity to Oak Ridge for a certain type of user, which this company feels isn't well satisfied. And by looking into the future of DOE contracting and the number of constructors, temporary users, they feel that they've got a good market for that. So any hotel motel dollars that are generated will be new dollars in the minds of this company. The tax abatement does not affect those payments whatsoever. The tax abatement is for the value of the building and the supplies in the building. So the city would still recover through the IDB 66% of that tax revenue, and then after 10 years it'd go to 100%. I don't know if that answers your question.
That does. Thanks for clarifying that. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Hammond.
Coming back to Councilwoman Smith's question, I know up to this point there hasn't been necessarily engineering. They provided the conceptual drawings. Out of curiosity, if we were to approve this moving forward, would there be engineering involvement with regards to what's developed out there, engineering staff, or what does that look like with regards to ensuring that there's something more than just their conceptual drawings that gives us the assurance that won't have any adverse impact, short-term or long-term, on natural, flow?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. What we're looking at tonight is only the pilot authorization, which is a funding mechanism for the project. Once the funding, assuming the funding was approved and the project moved forward, they would have to do detailed engineering drawings showing elevations and all the detailed stuff that would have to go through our site review process, go through our Public Works Department for evaluation by our engineering company, and it would be a full set of requirements, just like any other project. The only difference would be that we would be helping, if you would, with the financing by giving them a 33% tax offset.
Okay. Is there any aspect of this project that would end up coming back before us? Maybe not. I'm just asking.
It's difficult for me to say off the top of my head because I don't know. I know that from an engineering perspective, I really don't see anyone asking you for a waiver because we wouldn't do that. It would be bad performance. I think the zoning has already been checked and the zoning was found to be appropriate, so that wouldn't have to go before you. I'm just not certain.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Suggs, I just have a problem with this going forward tonight. Since I've been mayor, now I've worked very hard on economic development issues, but I've also worked very hard to be sure and maintain the integrity and the advice of the Budget Committee. I'm just not ready to do a go-around the Budget Committee that we approved based on my appointments. So I don't really understand where this, the urgency in this to go outside a process that is established, and I'd heard nothing about it until, it showed up on the agenda. So that's my concern. Is there a representative of the owner of the company here? Okay, so that seals it for me. Somebody that's coming in and wants a special tax treatment or benefit, at least ought to have the ability or the wherewithal to stand up here and respond to whatever the questions are. Sure. So for that reason, I move to defer this until the July meeting or the August meeting, whatever the will is of my colleagues, but I want it to go through the regular process.
I'll second that motion.
So all those in favor of Ellen?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I had a question, though.
Okay, Mr. Hensley, go ahead.
Mr. Suggs, the extended stay hotel has got a lot to do with what we're doing here. And in talking to Mr. Hetrick about the ballpark and the use of the ballpark, this hotel would not be available for sporting events at the ballpark that's right next door. Is that correct? Because this is an extended stay hotel.
Mr. Hensley, I wouldn't hazard a guess as to what the policies are for the extended stay hotels. I know I have stayed in extended stay hotels for one night or 2 nights several times when I was traveling, so I don't know the answer to this question.
My question, what does extended mean?
Well, it's, when you look at the Holiday Inn Express, it's technically sorry, not the Holiday, the Marriott is an extended stay. The other hotel we talked about earlier is an extended stay. So we have quite a few of those we have 2 of those in town that have that in their concept.
But again, I'm not against the project necessarily, but I do think it's important that we have the ability to ask more questions and
Certainly.
that it go before the budget committee for their review and then recommendation. So the motion is to defer this item until the July meeting. Yes is to defer. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? Okay, this matter is deferred into the July meeting. Thank you all. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
A resolution authorizing the interim city manager to repurchase the property owned by Girls Inc. located at 1790 Oak Ridge Turnpike, which is a portion of property formerly owned by the National Guard Armory and commonly referred to by the city as the Armory property.
So move.
All right, it's moved and seconded. Mr. Hensley?
Mr. Suggs, how is the property divided between the Armory and the Kennel Club? Are they in the building or are they just on the property?
The Kennel Club is on a separate piece of property that's located, what you might think of as behind the behind the Armory.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Suggs? Seeing none, there's none. Okay, good. So the motion is to approve the repurchase of a portion of the Armory property from Girls Inc. We're on the board. The motion is to approve. Ayes 7, no nays. And the resolution is approved. Next item, Madam Clerk.
A resolution authorizing the approval of the Community Development Block Grant Consolidated Plan Program Year 2023 to 2025, including a Citizen Participation Plan, the Annual Action Plan for Program Year 2023, and the proposed allocations of CDBG entitlement funds for Program Year 2023, estimated at $208,666, and a public hearing is required by federal law.
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. I need a motion to open the public hearing. So moved. Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All right. So is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on this particular matter? Seeing none, I need a motion to close the public hearing. So moved. Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All right. Mr. Blazes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I know that you are all well aware of this process because we go through it every 1 or 3 years for the reapproval of our community development block grant. But in the interest of anybody who may be here or certainly watching on TV, I just wanted to say that this is part of the Housing and Urban Development Community Development Block Grant Program. Oak Ridge is an entitlement city, and because of that, we have to do, or required to do a 3-year, what's called a consolidated plan, which is the bigger picture of direction, and each year within that 3, a 1-year annual action plan. This is the beginning of the new 3-year plan and the first year of the annual action plan. As Ms. Hickman read in the resolution, the anticipated amount for this year is about $208,000. And there were 3 needs assessment public hearings held earlier this spring for citizens to weigh in. There was also an online opportunity. The draft before you is generally prepared by Matt Widener, former staff member, before he left our office, and then subsequently Jacob Smith, our new senior planner, sitting back here by Ms. Williams, picked up the baton and has shepherded this process through to this point. So if you have questions about the details, if I can't answer, I will call Mr. Smith up to try to add more. But he has actually kind of taken the baton, as I said, from Mr. Widener.
All right, I'm going to support this because of the 3 items that are being funded. I do have significant problems and pretty frustrated, quite frankly, with page 14, the needs assessment, where it's relying on terribly outdated data and numbers and has references in there that are just wrong about Oak Ridge losing population every year. When I sat here on May the 30th and gave city staff and everyone in attendance the new attendance figure, population figures, for the city. So my request is going to be that particularly page 14 and some of the following pages, as it references Oak Ridge losing population and a declining population, which can largely be attributed to the lack of new desirable housing. That's just wrong, and it needs to be updated. Now, I don't want to hold this process up, but as I understand, it's a draft, and it can certainly be revised or amended before, when's it have to be turned in?
In August, as we certainly have time.
All right.
I completely agree with you, Mayor, and we will make some adjustments in wording to accommodate that. The odd thing about this and the whole process is that HUD gives us a template in a software system, and they have the data that we have to download and use. And
that's okay.
No, I know.
Just as long as it's footnoted. But I don't want this going out in a public document because it will be used against us all across the country.
I agree. We will make those adjustments.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Yeah, just a question. I found a couple of things. It's clear that a lot of stuff gets outdated in this because it's boilerplate, and and there's a lot of repetition within it, which is HUD's fault, basically. So I found a couple things that I wanted to update. Can I send them to Jacob? Okay, he's nodding. So
yes, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Hensley.
Yeah, I want to call attention to something on page 39 where we talk about barriers to affordable housing. Describe any negative effects of public policies on affordable housing. And let's talk about the regulations for the CDBG consolidated plan require an explanation of whether the cost of housing on incentives to develop, maintain, or improve affordable housing are negatively affected by public policies. There's no public policy in this town that affects our taxes and our housing more than the lack of support from DOE. And it is a government agency pointed out there. So I really think that somehow we can get that point across, even if this document isn't read by 10 people. It still needs to be put in there that we do not get adequate support from our primary business.
All right. So this is, the motion is to approve, and I think it's based on, with the understanding that there are going to be some revisions. Again, I'm not trying to hold things up. Do you want to go forward and with approval tonight, or do you want this to come back in July, since it doesn't have to be submitted until August? When in August, Mr.
Mr. Mayor, we would be satisfied as staff. We would be happy to bring it back to you in July, or we can make substitutions and updates of this document. We can send copies of the updated section to the council so that you can see what we did, and then hold off until, whichever is the council's desire.
What's the pleasure, council?
I just as soon approve it tonight and get it edited between now and when it has to be submitted, because I think we've had to do that in the past as well. It's a gargantuan task to put all this content together, and I think, and I don't think it's going to affect our position on the action.
All right. So, okay. So, in terms of approval tonight? Okay. All right. So the motion is to approve, and we are on the board. Ayes 6, 1 nay, and it is approved. All right. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
A resolution authorizing the purchase of electric and water meters for the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project in an amount not to exceed $5,026,910.12 for use by the Electric Department.
Move for approval.
Moved and seconded. Mr. By.
Mayor and council, an item in front of council is a resolution authorizing the electric department to purchase electric and water meters in an amount not to exceed $5,026,910.12. Back in 2021, council authorized a resolution that authorized the city to enter into contract with Smart Census USA Corporation and to get electric and infrastructure that would allow to get meters, and SmartWorks as the company that would allow the management of the data from those meters. Since then, we were able to acquire meters in a pilot program, and we've installed 8 electric meters and 8 water meters. And within the first week of us installing the water meters, at least, we were able to detect water leak right away from one of the customers whose meter were there, and we were able to notify that customer and get that problem fixed right away. Since then, the quotes that we have on those meters, the cost is good up until the end of this month. After this month, the cost can escalate based on the CPI. And if we go ahead and give a PO to purchase the meters that we need now and that we'll potentially need in the future, that will allow us to save approximately $250,000 as a whole. I believe, after talking to another utility just today who is about to get into that project, that we will probably be saving a lot more than that, because the quote and the prices that they got given by this same company is about 67% more than we're planning on buying it. And to add to that, the lead time for the water meter is about 8 weeks, but the electric meter is in between 12 to 18 months. So there will be other resolutions that we're planning on bringing in front of council for consideration for the duration of this project. in the next year to two before the completion of this project. Be happy to answer any questions you
Mr.
may have.
Dodson?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned save money. That was one of the questions I was
Right.
going to ask if we went ahead and approved this, but
Right.
also, I know you alluded to the delivery time.
Right.
We've had trouble with that in the past.
Right.
So again, you said how many months before those things would,
So we have, right now they're telling us 12 to 18 months.
okay.
And we have another utility very close to us that has ordered meters 18 months ago, and they're just now starting to get them.
Okay, thank you. Ardo.
Mr. Hensley?
Yeah, Ardo, I'm all in favor of this, but one little small request.
Right.
Is in these documents, could you put an acronym index somewhere? There's so many TPGs and CFPs that I could hardly follow the logic.
Okay. Will do. You're welcome.
Ms. Smith?
Yeah, I'm real enthusiastic about this. I think it's going to be beneficial for the city in efficiency of operations.
Correct.
And it's going to be beneficial to our residents and businesses to a degree that they probably don't even recognize right now. So I'm looking forward to having this reach fruition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion is to approve, and we're on the board. Ayes 7, no nays, and it is approved. Hang on just 1 second, because you've got item number G also, don't you? All right, without objection, I'd like to go ahead and take up item G, and then we'll come back to item F. Is that without objection? All right. Madam Clerk, item G.
A resolution authorizing awarding bids for the purchase of 3-phase pad-mounted transformers from Power Supply Company LLC of Chattanooga, Tennessee, in an amount not to exceed $1,426,634.50, and Stuart C. Irby of Johnson City, Tennessee, in an amount not to exceed $1,044,255.60, for a grand total not to exceed amount of $2,470,860.10.
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Mr. By.
Mayor and council, my item in front of you is an item for you to consider this resolution to award these transformers for the purchase of three-phase pad-mounted transformers. We went through the city competitive bidding process, and we have if you look at the abstract, you will see that based on the quotes and the lead time, we've chosen 2 different companies. And we're trying to get these items and get them in and replenish basically the stock. The last time we've ordered these were in 2021, and we have yet to get those. And they were originally supposed to be here in December. Now we're being promised August, and we really hope they get here in August, because those will be used for some potential project that we have in the pipeline right now. And once these get here, they will be used to replenish stock or on an emergency basis. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Pye? Seeing none, the motion is to approve, and we're on the board. Ayes 7, no nays. Thank you, Mr. By. Now, Madam Clerk, we're back on item F.
A resolution authorizing the city to participate as a co-applicant with the Knoxville Transportation Planning Organization to apply for and accept if awarded a Federal Highway Administration Safe Streets and Roads for All SS4A grant in a total amount of up to $10 million. The city's portion of said grant is anticipated to not exceed $2 million and would require a 20% local match of up to $400,000.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Burge.
The Knoxville TPO has conducted a study on fatal and serious incident or serious injury accidents at locations throughout the region. and has used that data to put together a grant application for this federal highway grant. That application would be in an amount up to $10 million, but that $10 million then would be spread across Knox County, potentially Oak Ridge, parts of Anderson County, parts of Loudoun County. The portion that is being looked at for the city of Oak Ridge is at the intersection of the Turnpike and Tulane Avenue. That's a potentially hazardous area where they would be making improvements. It's an anticipated that we would be up to $2 million. It doesn't mean we are going to spend $2 million. It could be as little as $1 million. We're initially going to look to the state to provide the matching funds since it is a state route. But if they fail to do so and we feel it is in the best interest of the city to move forward with the project, then we would be coming back to you at a later date to ask for the matching funds to move forward with that project.
Okay, questions for Mr. Burge? Ms. Smith?
Yeah, what are the statistics that led to that particular intersection being selected? It's right out here, so we're all familiar with it.
I don't have them with me at this time, but I can provide them.
Okay, so, but you don't know whether it's fatalities or just a lot of injuries or what's going on? No, okay.
So, do I understand we're asking, you're asking for this approval for a project that we really didn't identify ourselves?
That is correct. It was identified by the TPO. It's a state route, so it's not one that we would necessarily take on as the city typically. But we're signing on as the city to the grant saying that we agree that this would be a positive project.
And before we move forward, you're going to approach the state in terms of whether the Department of Transportation will put up the matching fund.
That is correct.
And before we move forward, you would come back and get additional approval
That is correct.
to go forward. Okay. Thank you.
And just a
All right, Mr. Hensley?
Were there other intersections in the city of Oak Ridge that were even on the list?
There were several others as you moved down the turnpike, but this was identified as the most likely candidate to receive the funding, both due to economic factors in the location as well as the data that the TPO looked at.
Without any data, I can think of worse, but
Ms. McKinney?
Yeah, I think based on the information in the resolution and stuff I've read about this program, that this is something, it involves planning and analysis as well as implementation. So they would be looking at the issues and, you know, maybe they would decide that there are other intersections that need, you know, there's other stuff besides that intersection that needs work, that it's probably not just intersection improvements, but looking at the general site. And probably the proximity to the high school is one of the things that led to this being on the list, because I think schools were a priority for this program. So.
Mr. Gleason?
Yeah, just to add a little color commentary from the executive committee on the TPO side. The KSI data, which is a really non-emotional way for killed and seriously injured, so be careful the acronym lists that you asked for.
Right.
So the KSI data is fairly dated here. It's a number of years behind. So whatever was happening there at that intersection triggered, you know, probably 3-ish years ago, I think is when they closed it.
That's correct.
Yeah. So we've asked for some updated data specifically as it relates to Solway, strangely enough, because of the high frequency of accidents that we've seen there. Solway didn't make it in the last KSI report, but it does if you adjust the data for more currency. So we expect to see improvements there as well.
Mr. Hope?
Mr. Burge, we've just gone through a major redevelopment of our intersections along the turnpike in anticipation of new paving that is going to happen at some point when the state decides to do that, with the sidewalks and the crosswalks and all the different things. Will anything they're doing or want to do to this intersection affect any of that new improvements to those intersections?
It could potentially at that intersection. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to breathe into this thing. It could potentially at that intersection. At this point, they came forward to us at the end of May asking to move forward with this grant application. It's very conceptual right now as to what would be done. It's basically seeing if they can get the money, and then if they can't get the money, coming back to us to look at what they want to do there.
So this is a hard maybe.
It is a very hard maybe.
Okay.
Mr. Dodson.
Well, I appreciate the data and bringing that particular intersection up. One of the things I would rely a lot of this on would be information that we receive from our police force on where those particular areas, problem spots are. I don't know if there are other areas that are identified as maybe even more problematic, and what we've experienced there as far as fatal crashes, or how would you like to answer that?
So it's not entirely just what is the most problematic intersection. It's what is the most problematic intersection that also meets the criteria laid out in the grant process. And that is, like Councilwoman Smith was pointing out, location matters as well. So the proximity to the high school, the economic development blocks that it's located in also affects where they want to move forward with this grant application, because those factor into whether or not they will receive the grant.
Okay, thank you, Pat.
Are there any other, Mr. Hammond?
Just a note for clarity, we are talking about the intersection of the Turnpike and Tulane.
That's correct.
Yes. I just want for folks listening to make sure everybody knew what intersection we were talking about.
Fair to say, at some point, we're going to have this back in front of us, either to go forward, not to go forward, or change locations.
If we receive the grant.
If we receive the grant. Gotcha. All right. Any other questions? The motion is to approve, and we're on the board. I-7, no nays. It is approved. Next item, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Ms. Burge.
A resolution approving an updated compensation plan effective July 9th, 2023, which implements certain modifications to the plan as discussed with the Compensation Review Committee and is incorporated into the approved FY 2024 budget.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Alt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. This item before you incorporates the changes that most of you have seen and discussed now that we worked on with the Compensation Committee. So that's taking certain position families that we identified as being significantly underpaid relative to our market in the area, and reclassifying them in the existing pay structure to help make them more competitive. And the document also incorporates the 7% pay increase that you all approved earlier tonight upon second reading.
Thank you. Mr. Hope, you have comments?
No, I think this is everything, just a matter of finishing up what we talked about before, so nothing new to add, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? This is a product of a lot of work, which is really admirable on everybody's part. So again, I want to thank everyone who's been involved in this, and thank our city employees for their patience, and we made a promise to you last year, and continue to fulfill that, and want to do that going forward. All right, any other questions? The motion is to approve, and we are on the board. I-7, no nays, and the new compensation plan is approved. Next item of business, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Alt.
A resolution awarding a contract to Path Construction Northeast Incorporated of Arlington Heights, Illinois, for the construction of the Oak Ridge Conference Center in an amount not to exceed $4,591,000.
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Suggs.
Mayor, council members, this is a award of a project that we've been working on with the council for quite a while. It's the reconstruction of the Civic Center to build a large meeting room that can have banquets that can be divided into 3 areas. It also constructs 3 meeting rooms that can be used for other purposes, redoes the kitchen, adds fire suppression to the entire facility. It was bid with an estimate, when you do not include the contingency, of about $4.2 million, and within round numbers, they came in just about what the estimate was. Ray Evans has been working with this project since the beginning. He's here tonight to answer specific questions for you. Funding is from a $2.9 million set aside by the state of Tennessee, which is currently being held by the IDB. There would have to be additional funding from the general fund. The general fund appropriation would be about $2.126 million for this contract, and council should be aware that there would be about another $450,000 coming to you at a later date for things like technology and furnishings, which are not included in the original bid. Mr. Evans or either one could be happy to answer any questions that you have about this.
Mr. Gleason.
Is the impact to staff reflected in the budget that was approved? We forecast any staff over the next 12 months?
There's no addition to staff added.
In the next year? Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Mr. Hammond.
And this kind of sort of goes back, Jack, to some of our conversation just a little bit earlier, and it's just an FYI. When we spoke about the conference center at one point before, I can't remember if it was a work session or where it was, kind of pricing and usage strategies came up relative to who can use it and how and what that pricing would be, and if pricing to fund it might price out some of the people who might be able to take advantage of it. And of course, when we spoke earlier, we talked about that being a part of the discussion moving forward and something we would explore at a later date. But I did want to make note that that was a significant part of the conversation when we did talk about moving forward with this project. And I look forward to those continued conversations.
Reverend Hammond has pointed out a good point. Within the next 15 months, we're going to need to develop a policy on the use of this facility. We're going to have 2 goals that we're going to have to balance. One is we're going to want to recover the cost of the facility. We're going to want to recover the maintenance and the staffing and other costs associated with it. At the same time, we're going to want to support our community functions. And how that comes out is a discussion that we have 15 months to answer, and hopefully we can come to a balance that takes both of those considerations.
Mr. Hensley?
Yeah, Mr. Suggs, you had said earlier that it didn't affect staff, but it does mean, but staff does get moved around. And some of the stuff, like Parks and Rec ends up over in recording for the blind former building. Is that correct?
Under we will have some staff relocations of offices. I'm sorry, what I intended to say was that we had not budgeted for extra staff for this item, but there will be some staff relocations. Potentially some more time spent by maintenance crews such as janitorial staff, that we would try to recover that cost from the users, things like that that are not in this proposal as presented.
Mr. Dotson.
Yeah, I've asked this question before. I know we're going to build this if we approve this, but we need somebody to manage it. Who's going to be taking the helm of that ship?
The day-to-day management of the facility will be my recommendation. That remains in Parks and Recreation, since they have a wide number of users. That doesn't mean that they'll be the ones promoting it or trying to bring in users for it. That function I can see being a part of our Explore Oak Ridge CVB, being the focal point of that.
And this
we are not doing, let me add, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
We are also not doing food services or anything like that. So in terms of catering and those kind of things, those will be strictly private. We will not be involved in that.
Yeah, that was my next question. And then the next question is, Are we going to have any parking challenges? I know that we've talked about that in the past. When you put in something that will accommodate that many people, 400 tables, all those things, we're going to have something done with the parking area. And I think, Ray, you've mentioned that we could reconfigure that to accommodate more folks parking their cars there.
Yes, that's correct. It's my opinion that we could probably increase the capacity of that parking area by 20% over what's there now because of the inefficiency of the layout. And another thought is that if you have large enough events, we've got the high school parking lot across the street that we can simply run shuttles back and forth to the attendees at a conference.
Okay. And just some positives. Near the library, I think this is a positive. Also near the amphitheater, that's a positive. And also near the park, that's a positive. And near the senior center, so it's I know we were looking at another location at one time, and I'm really glad that this is working out the way it is. So thank you, Ray.
And near the mall.
Yeah. Ms. Smith?
Yeah, on parking, one thought that I had the other night, supposedly there were about 1,000 people at the Tim O'Brien concert at Summer Sessions Saturday evening, and everybody found a place to park, and it wasn't extreme. It was that there was plenty of space. And of course, that was Saturday evening. There was nobody working in City Hall that night and so forth. But I think that it is feasible to get a lot of people into the Civic Center and find places for them to park. So that was interesting to observe. Going back to this particular item, one thing that we're often asked about in connection with a construction project like this is whether we have provision for whether this will involve union labor. The local unions always want to know whether we have any provision for minority contractors to be involved in it. Whether the general contractor has any inclination to pursue either of those, or whether we're going strictly on a price basis.
The award that's recommended is based on low bid.
Okay.
We would be happy to, and I think we should, reach out. Path Construction is a well-known construction company in the area, and we would be happy to reach out and encourage them to use local labor sources, including underrepresented groups in the construction. We can make those contacts immediately, encourage them to do that.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Gleason?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Jack, in the excluded from the overall price, I think was plaza hardscaping, any improvements to the parking lot. There were some comments about asbestos abatement. None of that is in that cost, correct?
That's correct. Mr. Evans did these numbers. I could pass it to him. To let you know, though, the total cost of the asbestos removal, which was discovered and quantified after the bids were received, so they could not be in the bid. If we do a partial remediation, that is cover up the tile but remove everything that needs to be removed, the cost on that is $6,860 to $10,700. And for a complete remediation, which includes removing the tiles, which right this moment we plan on leaving in place and covering up, which is an acceptable way of treating asbestos. But should we decide to remove that, the cost is under $20,000. So it is a real numbers, but it's not when compared to the total cost of the project.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hammond?
Thank you. That was one of the questions I was going. So on the plaza hardscaping and outside that, I know we're looking at, is there notes at a later time? Is there I guess a plan for that? I know I saw on social media, so a number of people were asking about that particular, the plaza as well. So I just wanted to get some sort of response to that based on some of the traffic that was going on social media with that.
Thank you, Reverend Hammond. The original plaza was priced at simply replacing what was there with permeable stone. After we evaluated the bids were not outrageous at all, but neither were they super cheap. And we felt like that there hadn't been an appropriate time spent on developing questions such as what kind of lighting should be out there, what kind of central facility should be there, what we should do to make that plaza a more community-oriented space. So rather than award it as part of this contract, we wanted to put off some time, let that project and those thoughts be developed and get some input from the community. Additionally, there appear to be some grants that may be available to help us to pay for that, but those will take some time to apply for and be awarded. And Ray, you may have more to say on that.
The plaza, without question, needs to be redone. It's probably needed to be reconstructed for a number of years. So sort of at the last minute, City Manager Watson decided to ask the architects to include that in the package. We were not able to do any conceptual design per se. Had their engineering consultant simply do plans for the permeable pavers and such, but not any. We didn't have any landscaping in. We didn't have any lighting in. We didn't have any sort of feature in the project, and so I think it's wise that we set this aside for the time being. I can think of at least 2 really good state grants that the plaza would be eligible for, and so rather than spend our money, so to speak, or 100% of our money, we can apply for these grants and maybe only spend 30% of the cost as opposed to 100% of the cost.
Yeah, that just certainly speaks to people who would say, why did you do this and not do anything over here? Let's know there's a plan for that, so thank you.
All right, Mr. Dodson.
Yeah, just a very quick question. This was posed to me just today. Are we going to be keeping the fountain, and are we going to keep the sculpture?
I think that the sculpture is going to have to be relocated during the construction. We'll have to make sure that it's protected and moved off-site so that it doesn't become damaged. Mm-hmm. The fountain and the maintenance of that fountain is one of those big questions that I think needs to be considered as part of the plaza overall. We, at this project, will not remove the fountain, nor will it refix the plaza. But again, as Ray discussed and as we talked about earlier, we think it is time to look at that plaza as a whole, see what the central features need to be, and try to develop a new plan for it.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, sir.
All right, any other questions? Again, I just want to say, Mr. Evans, thank you for your hard work on this. As Mr. Suggs stated, you've been involved in this from, the first day it was proposed, and we wouldn't be here tonight without the hard work that you put in it. It's greatly appreciated. All right, we're on the board. The motion is to approve. Ayes 7, no nays, and the renovations are on the way. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
A resolution assigning $3 million of the general fund's fund balance to be used to transition the impact of the full cost of operating Fire Station 4, with said assignment ending at the conclusion of fiscal year 2030 and returning all unused funds back to unassigned fund balance status.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Suggs.
For the past few years, we've been receiving $1.5 million annually from NNSA for the operations of the West End Fire Station on the far end of the city. We've been notified by NNSA that contract will end at the end of September 30th of 2026. That equates to about 15 cents on the property tax rate today. Over the past few years, we have received enhanced revenues, particularly for sales tax, that has generated a much larger fund balance than we would normally have. So there's assignments and classifications of fund balance that GASB allows, is just you kind of use as a tool. So we're incorporating that at this time to assign $3 million of fund balance, so that when we get to fiscal 2027, we'll be able to migrate under a plan so that we don't have to raise taxes at 15 cents all at one time. And obviously, we don't know the circumstances that we'll be under in 2027, but you've got the money there to migrate, and because it's done by resolution, it will be easily amendable when you get to 2027 to work the plan out. The money will stay there until, I'm thinking,
2030?
Yes, I'm sorry. And then it will rescind back to the unclassified status.
Questions for Ms. McGinnis?
Just comment, this
Ms.
has
Smith?
been discussed by the Budget and Finance Committee several times, and I think it's a good creative solution to an unusual problem we face. So appreciate your work.
Likewise, I think, Ms. McGinnis, you've done an outstanding job on this, and I appreciate the hard work that you and your staff have put in the Budget and Finance Committee. The motion is to approve, and we're on the board. Ayes 7, no nays, and it is approved. Next item of business, let's see, I think we've completed our general agenda here. The next item of business will be appearance of citizens. Citizens should be permitted to address City Council about matters that are not on the agenda this evening. Any citizen wishing to do so shall raise your hand, proceed to the public lectern, and after recognition, state your name and your full address and the purpose of your appearance before council. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes and shall relate to matters of city business. They shall not generally result in a formal response or action tonight at the time of the presentation, because in most cases, neither the council nor the chair, the staff may be ready to respond. However, I may answer questions or direct the city manager to do so, or he may be requested to work with the citizen to effect resolution of the matter. Statements that are purely political in nature will not be allowed, such as campaign speeches or announcements of candidacy for office, nor will announcements of civic or social event that is unrelated to city business. Are there any members of the audience wishing to address council? Seeing none, we are moving on to...
Can I make a comment? You zoomed through the city manager's report so quick, and I had a question for Mr.
We're not
Suggs.
there yet.
Oh, okay. Good.
We're getting there. All right, elections, appointments, announcements, and scheduling. Are there any matters related to that we need to talk about? Okay.
I think we should mention publicly that there are several vacancies on city boards and commissions that the clerk's office has posted, and they're open for application, I think, through June the 30th. Okay, so people who want to serve on a city board or commission can look on the city website and find out about them.
Yes. All right, request for new business items or future briefings. All right. Now we're on the city manager's report. Mr. Suggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few things to cover I think you'll find of interest. The first three are related. We had a final grant review of Blankenship Field, which was a huge, long project, a final grant review of the military grant for the TEMA projects, and a review of the aeronautics grants, all of which were received without comment. So three reviews and 3 positive outcomes for our major grants that we've been working on. All those came in the last few weeks. Very proud of our staff on that. Thought you'd like to know that the police department swore in 5 new officers on June 5th. We have about 1 position vacant, but we have about 10 people in training, so we have a very young force. But with the adjustments you've made, I hope that we can help these people stay with us and move through their careers. This Thursday, June 15th, the senior staff is going to be out of pocket. There will be very qualified people here to run the city, and we will be reachable in case of emergency. But we're going to be doing an off-site training session. The subject will be change management. trying to get the organization ready for the changes that we expect to happen in the next few months. The library is very excited to be having a ribbon cutting on the 20th. We're going to cut the ribbon on the children's room and the improvements that they've done. We put a lot of, frankly, the council has put a lot of resources and money into that library, and it's a chance for them to show you what they were able to do with it. They're excited to do that. There will be a ribbon cutting about 5, a little bit reception afterwards, and then at 6 o'clock we're going to hold the work session in the library so that we can just go straight from there into the work session. The final thing, which isn't written down, as interim city manager, I submitted comments on the mercury storage proposal rules, obviously with the help of Dr. Fitzgerald. Copies of that letter were put in your mailboxes along with the submittal. We submitted all of the formal comments that council had made last fall. And that pretty well summarizes what I have for you.
All right, Mr. Hensley.
Yeah, you said we've gotten 5 new police officers, but I was wondering how we stand on SROs that we had discussed in the past.
We have not added any SROs to the force at this point. We are actively involved in a number of arenas trying to make sure that the city benefits from the new state policies. Those policies are being formulated as we speak. As soon as we know what they are, we'll be ready to move forward. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hope.
Jack, and this goes more to Julie with the library. I will not be here on the 20th. So with you and especially all the very close people that I know that are friends of the library, I'm just making sure it's on public record that if I was here, I would be here, I would be there, but I will be somewhere on the beach at that point. So I just want to make sure I clarify that in public record.
I believe you better get a hall pass from one of your family members.
Yeah, I'm working on that this week. So
okay, well deserved, well deserved. Mr. Hammond.
Same SRO question, but pardon my ignorance, I can't remember. Was there like a state initiative to support cities with regards to SROs, and are we looking at that, or where is that?
So there is a state initiative to support SROs, and there's been funding identified at the state level to pay for those SROs. But the administration, how it's going to flow through to the school systems, when that money is going to be available, even the mechanisms of contracting are kind of up in the air. They're being developed right now. We're watching very closely so that we can strike without irons hot.
So we're not exploring adding SROs before that. Is our SRO strategy tied to that?
Our SRO strategy right now is to kind of let it develop a little before we added. We do have some SROs, but before we add 10 new positions, to kind of make sure that we knew how that program developed a little more.
Mr. Gleason.
Yeah, real quick, Jack. I mean, you tried to blow through it real fast, but item number 5, that change management offsite, just wanted to publicly acknowledge how progressive that is, understanding that what you guys are going to be talking about helps ease the transition from legacy city manager to the role that you're filling today to us filling that position long term. So a lot of folks don't think to do that. That's good. I think it's time well spent.
Thanks, sir. Just as a note, when you look at our senior staff, all but one director in the city right now was hired by Dr. Watson and has only worked for Dr. Watson. And so we'll be, no matter who we hire, we'll be looking at some changes, and getting the organization properly positioned for that would be, hopefully be beneficial.
Do you want me to save you some time?
Please.
So I was taught in the Marine Corps that people hate 2 things, kind of the way things are and change. So if you want to just cancel the offsite, yeah.
Well, we've already bought lunch, so I guess we'll do it.
Along those lines, let me let council know that by the end of the day on June the 23rd, we will have a report from GovHR USA on the applications for the city manager's position, and a report on the search. So you should be looking for that on Friday, June the 23rd. So is there any other business to come before council? Seeing none, I want to thank everybody for their preparation and getting through this rather long but very, very important agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Jack, you're doing such a good job, we don't have to hire any of them, right?